One of you do it.
Hey, I've done it. I've pressed the button.
Hello.
Okay, that's brilliant.
Welcome to day 4. Oh my goodness, this is going really fast. So just a reminder of the day's theme. So the school partnerships, tutoring in schools is the theme of today. So we're talking about how we can connect with schools, which is very exciting because that's a big growth area in tutoring at the moment and lots of potential. Thank you to our sponsors for the day, LearnCube, and you'll be hearing more from them and the opportunity to sign up to their online school if you're interested in that. And the reminder that the wellbeing focus of the day is mindfulness. So we'll be getting lots of tips on our mindfulness through the day. And yeah, with our third and final session and with Kate King today, I've been really enjoying this series. And as we've just been saying, I think we need about 100 more, but just one more this week on reading in schools. So that is not no, that is not what we went for, was it? My brain has gone dead. Apologies, Kate.
It's about reading.
It's about reading. Yeah, so I think it's identifying barriers and things like that to support children with reading in schools. Perfect.
Shall I share my screen and get started?
Yes, thank you.
Oops. No, don't mean to do that. Sorry, guys. Let me play this from the start. Share my screen. Right, that's better. So today we're going to be looking at reading and how understanding the difficulties of reading are really important in the process of reading, why they're really, really important in order to target intervention. If we don't target intervention, all we're doing is effectively putting sticking plasters over difficulties. And yes, that can be effective for some children, but actually for children who've got a specific difficulty in an area, that's not enough. We need to find out exactly where the problem is. You know, it's a bit like me going to the doctor and saying, oh, I've got a bad leg, and they say, put a wrap a bandage around the whole leg. Well, actually, I need a knee replacement. So, what is reading comprehension? Something we talk about. It's a term we talk about all the time, but actually, what is it? Well, it's this construction of a clear and complete and integrated, that's a key word, representation of the meaning of text. Language proficiency underpins comprehension. We talk before we read. Language comprehension can therefore be seen as a predictor of reading comprehension, unless there is an underlying difficulty with the skills involved. And you'll see me breaking this down into the skills as we go through the presentation. But you often get a child who has a difficulty with reading comprehension when you find out that they didn't start talking until the age of 3.5, maybe. So what is reading comprehension? Some believe that it can only be achieved if the reader has that as their goal, their purpose. So we can read stuff, but we don't actually take it in. Good comprehenders take a flexible approach, looking for detail or skimming, depending on what the purpose is. But the poor comprehenders tend to spend the same time reading whatever the purpose is. And they often regard reading as a word decoding exercise. That's their goal, not the meaning of the text. I worked with a lady who called it barking at text. And it is a bit like that. You're barking at something, but you're not taking any meaning from it. If the aim to comprehend is limited, it's going to impact on all of the elements involved in the process. So we need to focus on the outcome of reading. That can be supported by asking questions that are answered through reading. And so the types of questions will impact on the way it's read. Are we looking for facts? Are we looking for inference to be drawn? Are we looking for inconsistencies? So poor comprehenders need that reason in order to set the aim and have a purpose for reading. And the comprehension questions, whether we're doing it orally or written, they need to be sufficiently demanding to push the aim of understanding, but without losing confidence. So it's that old thing about scaffolding. But what questions should you be asking? Well, the key to understanding, the key is understanding the different components, both of the process of reading and the process of comprehending. Once you know that, you can find out where this weakness lies, focus on that and target intervention. Because targeting intervention, research supports that that's the way forward. So here's the process of reading that was modelled by Scarborough and colleagues back in 2001. And it breaks the process of skilled reading down into these two branches. The language comprehension, which is our background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, the structure of language, our verbal reasoning, so that's being able to make sense of what it is we're hearing, and our knowledge of literacy. So that's the more we read, the greater knowledge we have of literacy. So this is becoming increasingly strategic. And then we've got the word recognition, which we need in order to be able to access the text. That's the phonological awareness, the decoding, and the sight recognition. Increasingly automatic. So increasingly automatic process, increasingly strategic comprehension is going to give us the skilled reading. So fluent execution and coordination of word recognition and text comprehension. So skilled readers have that automatic word recognition skills, and they use the context to construct coherent mental representation. We're making a video in our heads. They've got a good vocabulary, and they understand how language works. They understand about root words and the bits that we add onto them, different parts of speech, intonation. And they also have good listening comprehension skills. If you're a struggling reader, if the word recognition part of the process of reading is still being built, so our emergent readers, or it's difficult for a variety of reasons, there's going to be less cognitive capacity for comprehension, less processing, less brain space for comprehension. So that's often why we will say, somebody's a struggling reader, we need to read it twice, or we read it to them and then they read it for themselves. If we haven't got the vocabulary, then that's going to make life difficult. And if we've got poor listening and weak receptive language skills, then that's going to affect reading comprehension. Don't forget, with language skills, we've got receptive language and we've got expressive language. So words, we've got our sight words. Those are our most common words. And we can teach those with flashcards, games, precision monitoring, pre-teaching technical words for different subjects. And then we need to do the decoding. So we need to know the phonological code, that chart of sounds. We need to be able to break words down into syllables. Understanding. 6 syllable rules, really, really important that those are taught. Because what we're trying to achieve is fluency, and fluency is measured by measuring accuracy and rate. Fluent reading doesn't mean comprehension, okay? It's a very common misconception that somebody can read very fluently, but actually they're not understanding. And this is where when a child is reading to a parent, the parent often believes they understand what they're reading, but they don't really. We need to look at how secure the language skills are. So don't forget, the oral language skills are underpinning reading. So reading comprehension difficulties are predated by impairments in oral language. That's backed by research. And our different backgrounds provide different experiences, knowledge, and language skills. So if you think about the child who's maybe being tutored for literacy, maybe they live in a house where English isn't their first language, or the parents aren't around very much, and they have a nanny, and language is functional. So they're not having discussions around the table, inquiring conversations, curious conversations about books, about what they're watching on television, or just the world around them. It's very easy for language in the home to become incredibly functional. So you can encourage by designing tasks that encourage spoken language. Because if the process of reading is effortful, well, let's go back a stage and develop the language skills. So articulating answers instead of writing them, and that's going to reduce the cognitive load. And if there is any kind of language impairment, whether it is with the expressive, receptive, or the articulation, that's going to have an impact. So these are the different elements of reading comprehension. So we've got 5 parts to reading comprehension. We've got monitoring our comprehension, understanding inference, the vocabulary, the structure of the text, and the grammar and cohesive ties. All of these build towards our comprehension. So we're going to look at them one by one. We're going to start off with inference. So inference is when the reader goes beyond what has been explicitly stated in the text. It's the mental integration of information. We need it to fill in those missing details, and it supports our acquisition of not just vocabulary, but knowledge. So when we read a word, we don't understand it, it's a new word, but actually we can take the meaning from the text as to what that word means, at least have a pretty good stab at it. And then we're acquiring knowledge as well. But there's going to be an impact if there's a difficulty in weakness, because remember working memory that we did yesterday, you've got to hold that information in your head, maybe something earlier from the text, in order for what you're reading now to make sense. We need to be able to access our semantic memory, our vocabulary, our knowledge. And we need to be able to link information. If we're going to link information, we've got to hold both bits in our head, but we've also got to have that flexibility of thinking. There are different types of inference. There's the cohesive, which is based on the text, necessary to understand it. Then there's the bridging, where we're linking things we know to different parts of the text or things we don't know. Predicting, and then evaluating. So based on our knowledge, it's often related to an emotional element, but we need it to understand. So we can improve inference by modeling aloud, by doing our thinking aloud. Oh, look, I wonder if, yeah, how do you know? Who, what, when, where, why? Using graphic organizers, you can help pull out information and clues that lead to the inferred. You can make it a game, be a detective. Don't forget, we're always observing. Is this process breaking down because of another element? So we've got this ladder of inference, okay? What facts can I use? What facts have I chosen and why? What's my understanding of the situation? What am I assuming? Why am I assuming it? What conclusion can I draw? That's one way of working it, but you know what? We can work it in the other direction. This is the conclusion I've drawn. Why am I assuming this? What is it I'm assuming? What is my understanding of the situation? What's backing up what I'm assuming? So it's a really useful tool to break down the inference process. Now, children who are on the autistic spectrum often struggle with inference. Now, we know that many of those children, broad generalization for which I apologize, like to have a process. So sometimes this can be a really useful tool for a child who needs a process to follow. So looking at vocabulary and the background knowledge. So we need to link vocabulary. We need a link because vocabulary and reading flow in both directions. We need to have good vocabulary for reading comprehension, and reading comprehension is a source of good vocabulary. So we support general comprehension and inference. We learn both vocabulary and knowledge from the text. But our background knowledge gives us a context so that we can build that mental model. If we have no background, say we're reading about, I don't know, a volcano disaster or an earthquake, if we have no background knowledge of that, that occurrence, then it's very hard for us to build a mental model and make sense of what we're reading. And we also need to support vocabulary by teaching it. So we need to teach meanings of specific words, but we also need to help children get better at working out the meanings of new words, because both of those things support comprehension. So take the word sign, yeah, you can do, so I love word, I'm a big fan of word maps. So sign, signal, signature, and so on. So you take looking for the bit in the word that you know. How can you use that to understand a word that you don't know? We can teach words before the text is read to help with mental modelling. So if you've got a piece of text that you're going to go through with a child, then you know that child because you've been tutoring them. So look for the words that you think, one, they may struggle to read, or two, they may not be sure of the meaning, and go through those before you start the task. There's a series of books, phonic books, fantastic books, and because they work through the phonic code, they build the skills, and at the beginning of each of those books, they go through tricky words that the child is going to come across in the text. Fantastic. Why don't all children's books do that? And we need to teach words that would be expected to understand for their age and stage. So we often assume they understand words like describe or explain. Monarchs in there, as I said the other day, I was teaching children who had a history question about asking for them to write about a monarch. And they knew about kings and queens and they'd never made that link. We assume that they have this knowledge, but often with some children, especially ones who are a bit slow to process, we might have slipped it into our teaching, but it hasn't actually gone in. And don't just teach definitions, make connections. We need to build this semantic network. If we're going to remember something, we need to have a hook to hang it on. And remember that things can have multiple meanings. If we taught just 10 new words a week, that's going to have only a tiny impact on the acquisition of new vocabulary. That's why children need to build the skills in order to build their vocabulary. So it's about these underpinning skills and building inquiry. So for acquiring new vocabulary, how can we help it? Well, we can derive the meaning from the context. How's the word being used? So this is where it's important to understand, is it a noun or is it a verb, perhaps? Think of the word table. I can table emotion, that's a verb, or I can eat at the table, that's a noun. Teaching word knowledge through morphology, so through prefixes, suffixes, roots. Roots are really useful because that's helping us understand where the word's coming from and making links. And it's great for general knowledge as well. So we often assume that children know what a verb is and what a noun is because we teach it so early on, but often that isn't secure. And this is where something like a close exercise can be really good because you can analyze, what kind of word are you looking for that gap? The more you know about a word, the more efficiently it's decoded, retrieved, and comprehended. Now looking at the structure of the words, the structure of the text. We need to provide a framework for building a mental model. And it's that framework that's going to support our inference and our learning. So take a different text. If you take a text from a newspaper or a letter or an article from a magazine, they've got different structures. If we take pieces of literature, the structure is going to be different. If we take information, it's going to be structured in a different way. So we need to teach those different structures. And those different structures are going to vary hugely depending on the age of the child and the stage that they're at. We can take questions verbally so that you can guide their learning. So talking things through, asking the questions, noticing, looking at the structure of the text is really, really important. How many paragraphs are there? How big are the paragraphs? Are they broken down? What's the purpose of a paragraph? Why do we use paragraphs? All of this is incredibly important because we teach children, oh, well, this is a sentence. It starts with a capital letter and it ends with a full stop. And they sort of get the fact that it must make sense. But do we actually teach the structure when it comes to the use of punctuation, of commas, of subclauses? Often we don't. And then if we've got a paragraph, then we've probably got a topic sentence in there, and do all the sentences within that paragraph make sense? So this is where a graphic organizer, which we talked about using for writing. So I recommended the big book of graphic organizers. So if you can use a just a visual model, you can extract the information in the reverse of when you're planning for writing. So what's the beginning of this text telling us? What's the bit in the middle telling us? What's the end telling us? Because if you don't understand what the structure is of a text, it makes answering the questions very, very hard because you don't know where to go back to. I don't know about you, but I know that when I've been really tired, even though reading as an adult is something that I don't need to put any effort into, but maybe if I'm very tired, my mind is wandering, and I read and I don't really take the meaning, and something happens in what I'm reading. I go, hang on a minute, what's happened there? And I have to go back and find that other bit in the text. But I need to know where to go back to. So that's just on an adult level. And we need to have experience of different texts, whether they're narrative or informative, and the whole huge variety that exists in both of those genres. Then we need to look at grammar and the cohesive ties. We need to understand grammar because we need to understand the integration of meaning between clauses and sentences, how it all fits together. There are key words that give us signals about the text and inference. And we've got two types of cohesion. So we've got local cohesion, which is linking adjacent sentences. And then we've got global cohesion, which is the understanding of the whole passage. Just wind back to what I've just mentioned about the text structure and looking at and analysing using a graphic organiser. Your local cohesion is your paragraphs, your global cohesion is how the whole lot fits together in the passage. Where are the gaps? Well, a lack of understanding of pronouns is a very common gap. Often children don't understand about omitted word, ellipses. So John went to the pub on Friday evenings. Fred did too. Without John went to the pub on Friday evenings, Fred did too doesn't make sense. We need that to be able to understand Fred did too, that Fred also went to the pub on Friday evenings. There are a lot of children who are very rigid in their thinking who don't make that link between those two sentences. They read Fred did too, doesn't make any sense. And you say who was at the pub? Well, John was at the pub. They've missed the fact that Fred went too. So then we've got the cohesion, the linking of the linking, and there are four elements. So we've got the whole and the part. It took some picnic supplies. The cider was warm. And we know that cider was part of the picnic supplies. Is that obvious to the child that you're teaching? We've got the item and the content. The boy asked for some orange juice. His sister handed him the bottle. What, the bottle of gin? What did she hand him? Is your child able to understand what's going on? And then we've got items in broader categories. So in the same passage, you might have drinks, pints, lager, all relating to the activity of a group of people. But is the reader able to make the link that these are all meaning the same thing? When somebody goes to the bar for some drinks, that they're refilling the pints of lager that they were sitting around the table drinking. And then we've got synonyms. And this is where obviously there's cultural differences as well. No, how many children understand the word pullover? It's not really a word that we use anymore. We often don't use the word sweater. We use sweatshirt, but we don't necessarily use a sweater for a woolly jumper. And what's within that child's vocabulary will depend on their home environment, their culture. So it's about knowing when the gaps might be occurring in order to be able to make those links and join the dots for them. And this often needs to be explicit. Very often connectives aren't secure. We've got different kinds of connectives. And connectives are often raced through year 2, year 3, and then we don't really go back to them. We've got our temporal connectives, the ones to do with time, before, earlier, later, afterwards, simultaneously, during. Can we use these? Can we build on them? We might know before and after, but actually, can we add in other words to, so it's like, think about our maths vocabulary when we've got the word add and all the other words that we use for add or subtract or multiply or divide. It's about building on that base meaning, that core meaning that we know that they have. It's just an expansion of don't use the word nice, think of something else. Causal, because, consequently, so. Then we've got the contrasting ones, the opposites and alternatives. Then we've got the continuity ones, adding on. Secondly, furthermore. We need to target what's needed. So this is you as teachers being detectives. Are the connectives not secure? Which connectives are not secure? Which ones are secure? Building from what they know is always important. There's no point going in at level 5 if they're still on level 2. So go to where they know and then build on it. Children love new words. Children love exploring things. So use that curiosity and highlight them in text, find them, be detectives. Use close exercises with a word bank to be able to fill in the right word, because that way you're building this comprehension skill. You're building that I've got to take the whole sentence, I've got to take the paragraph in order to know what I'm going to put in that gap for it to make sense. Because this is all building towards comprehension monitoring, because this is what we want to do. This is where the reader reflects on their own understanding. They're not just barking at text. It needs these cognitive resources of working memory and attention, because as I said yesterday, if we can't pay attention, our working memory capacity shrinks or is non-existent. We can't hold it. We need to pay attention to what we're reading. And we also need to pay attention to what's going on, because we need to notice when comprehension has failed. Now, this is where we often get children, young children, who are reasonably fluent readers, but they have got into the habit of not understanding what they're reading. Their goal of reading is to get to the book or get to the end of the 10 minutes and then mum's happy and then I can move on. But their goal is not the comprehension. They're doing the process of reading. So what we need to do is we need to notice when comprehension has failed. And this is where your skills are absolutely vital. You need to notice if there's unknown vocabulary. Notice if there's an unresolved pronoun problem. Notice if there's a need for influence. Looking back at the skills that we've just gone through, and where is it breaking down? So what do you need to do when understanding fails? Well, make sure that it can be that comprehension can happen at the bottom up. Can we understand sentences? Can we understand sentences and clauses? Can we understand paragraphs? How does it all hang together? Is it breaking down at a word level? So is it the understanding of the words or the decoding? Now, it's very easy when we're reading to stop and get hung up on a word that we don't know or we can't decode. And that way, we lose the meaning. We lose the gist of what we're saying, because don't forget, the working memory is having to hold everything. And we're taking our memory off, and we're asking it to do something else, to decode or look at this word that we don't know, and what we've already read has just disappeared. So what I always encourage is when a child is reading, if they come across a word that they don't know or that's unfamiliar, or maybe it's just difficult to decode, just putting a pencil line underneath it, skip over it. Very often, our brains are so clever at filling in the gaps, because often we can understand roughly what's going on, what we're reading, without that word in the sentence. But that doesn't mean to say we don't need to go back and understand that word and decode it. Very much we do. But in order to be able to do that, we do that as a separate process. And then we need to use tools that are easy to get. So if you've got a child who's finding reading difficult, are they really going to use a dictionary? Maybe their alphabet isn't even secure and they don't know where to look in the dictionary. And it's just hard work. But actually, if you've got an app like WordWord Pro, which is the one I use, which is free, and you just type it in, absolutely not a problem. It comes up with what type of word it is, the meaning, synonyms, all sorts of things. There's so many free resources out there for being able to access those words that we're not quite sure of. And then we need to think about the reasons for an action. So look back when you've read, yeah, what's gone on, you know, what bit didn't I understand? I didn't quite get that. I'm going to read on and then I'll come back to it. That bit didn't quite make sense. That's okay, but read on. And what we can do is we can look for errors. So this is quite a good game to play with children. So you take short sentences, excuse me, got my teeth in, with a sentence that doesn't fit in the paragraph. And that way, they're having to make sense of each sentence. So just take a piece of text and chuck in a sentence that's completely off the wall. Yeah, could be something that's completely bonkers. See if they can pick that one out. Or throw in an incorrect pronoun. You know, you're talking about Sophie and all of a sudden you refer to he. What's going on? Can they notice it? Getting them to notice that stuff. Being detectives, making it a game. You know, there are 5 errors in this, can you find them? And then having inconsistent information that contradicts something previously. You know, all of a sudden they're on the beach and they're applying sun cream, and then you know, somebody might put on their raincoat. Why they put on the raincoat? You know? So make it fun. Get creative. Because what we're trying to do is this scaffolding. So the children will be coming to you often in the anxiety zone. They don't like reading. It's difficult. It's certainly not fun because the meaning is hard to extract. So they're in the anxiety zone, and you need to take them into the learning zone where they feel safe. They need to feel safe in that learning zone with you, and that's why you're experts at what you do. And then you're trying to move them into the comfort zone, and it's only when they're in the comfort zone as readers will they be able to read for pleasure themselves, read for information for themselves. And that's how you need to scaffold it. We need to support our oral language skills. I can't stress this enough because enriching vocabulary is so important, but it needs to be done through context and linking to existing knowledge. We can teach an awful lot of comprehension skills by just using spoken language. We can listen to a paragraph, we can summarize it, we can ask questions, we can listen to it as many times as we want to. And it's interesting to me that when we test reading comprehension at a higher level, there are quite a few assessment tools that will ask the student to summarize what they've read. And that's key because as we build our skills for reading, then we need to be, if we've understood what we've read, we will be able to give a summary of it. If we haven't really understood it as we've read it, we struggle to give that summary. But you can do this orally. Just keep it light, start it short. Remember, you're working at that zone of proximal development. Are they comfortable with figurative language, idioms, jokes, riddles? Think about the children on the autistic spectrum or children who've got a language difficulty. They often struggle with these. They just don't get them. And then we can develop the spoken narrative, sequencing and plot building and planning and developing stories. So we can take something very, very simple like the little red hen, break it down. What's the sequence in which the story happens? How does the plot build? How can we develop this story? What happened? What would have happened if? And maybe putting one of the characters in the hot seat. So how did you feel when the little red hen asked you for help and you said no, and then you smelt the delicious bread she'd baked? So build these skills that we know are lacking for reading comprehension, build them verbally. So the core skills that we need to build are the ability to predict, taking the clues from the title and the opening sentence. And this relies on experience, because if we've got no experience of a newspaper article or a magazine article, then we don't really know what it relates to. Then we need to be questioning, and we need to look back for strategies and using the look back strategy to resolve things that don't quite make sense, that we didn't quite get. And we need to know where to find information. We need to create a mental model of the text. and we need to be able to summarize it to extract the gist and the main themes of what's been read. And this is the integration of the details into the whole. These are the skills we need to build. Albert Einstein said, if I can't picture it, I can't understand it. And that's really, really powerful, because when we're reading, if we're a competent reader, we're taking meaning from the text that we're reading. We're creating this video in our mind. How many of us as adults have read a book and then we go and see the film of the book and go, no, they didn't look like that. That's not how I saw them. There's a film recently where I've read the book. I don't want to see the film because I've seen enough of the film in the trailers to know that it doesn't match up with the video that's in my mind. But it's the same thing on a very simple level. If I can't picture something, I don't really understand it. So when we're building our vocabulary, we've got this fantastic resource of the internet and free picture resources like Unsplash, where we can actually search for pictures that relate to a word that maybe that child doesn't understand. So you can give them some kind of visual interpretation of what that word means. Really, really powerful. Visualizing and verbalizing builds on this, and it's a program developed by Nancy Bell that assists reading comprehension, expressive language skills, descriptive skills, and critical thinking. It's a very powerful program. It helps students process information in order to understand. And I think it's best used for Year 4+ to accelerate readers who lack comprehension skills. And it helps children who see parts but not the whole, linking reading with imagery, prior knowledge, and the process of thinking. So the visualizing and verbalizing process in courses are incredibly expensive and very effective. But actually, as tutors, there's no reason why you can't use these principles to enhance your teaching with reading. We can teach processes. So again, if we've got children who've got a difficulty, or who like a process, who want to have something to follow, these are the children who probably like to have the worked examples to refer back to if we're supporting maths. So teaching processes is TCPQR. So title, what does the title mean to you? What could this piece be about? Is there a caption? So what's the background content? What's the background? What's the context? Could it include something vital to understand? Do I need to read this, or can I miss this bit out? If there's a picture, what does it tell you? And questions. What would you be asked when you've read the passage? What's your reason for reading? This is where often reading the text, reading the questions, and then rereading the text is a really helpful process. Some people read the questions before they read the text. That can work with some children. For other children, what it can do is you can find that it increases their anxiety. So it might not be the right strategy for them. So you look at these, the title, the caption, the picture, the questions, and then you read using the knowledge that you now have. Another way of supporting comprehension is to break a text down using storyboards. So you can create your own storyboard, but storyboard that. You can pick out characters, you can put in speech bubbles. So this is a really good way. You've read a piece of text, okay, now let's create a storyboard to understand it. This can be fantastically important and useful when it comes to learning. So it could be learning about something in history. You've got to learn about the Reformation or Henry VII or whatever it might be. Or it could be where you've got a text that you're trying to support, where it's a text that's being studied for GCSE, to be able to have this visual to support the written word. And by making it, if we know that if we involve somebody in a process, then it's going to be more meaningful to them. So doing that storyboarding can be very powerful. So yes, it takes time, but actually if taking that time, what you're doing is you're breaking down the reading in order to be able to take that paragraph and maybe put it into one frame in your storyboard. Could be your storyboard if your child enjoys drawing, or even if they don't enjoy drawing. Stickmen are fantastic. You know, can you use that to be able to help analyze, break this down, externalize it, helping that passage make sense? Because what you're doing here is you're creating lots and lots of mental hooks so that when it comes to an examination, that child can probably be able to access this in their mind very, very easily because it's embedded, because they've been involved in creating it. We think about mind maps as something that we use for creating something. So for organizing ideas. Now I'm a huge fan of mind maps, but only mind maps that I can use electronically. I hate mind maps that are drawn because I always change what I want to do. And then this thing that I've made that was beautiful so far now becomes a mess. So I like the electronic ones where I can brainstorm things and I can move them around and I can make links and I can change the color. It's a fluid process. And instead of using a mind map to be able to gather ideas, to be able to plan for writing, why not use a mind map to deconstruct what you're reading? So what you're reading, what are the characters that you've come across? What do we know about them? So those can become different branches of our mind map. And then are they linked? Oh yes, they're their father. Oh, they're their aunt. So we can draw these lines to link them. And maybe a scenario, you know, something that's happening within the text, that can be another branch of the mind map. And that way you've got this visual representation of the text, but what you're teaching the child is how to analyze what they're reading, making sense of what they're reading. If they're struggling, to be able to make it fit together as a whole. So deconstructing the task, using short pieces of text to focus on what elements you're teaching is one aspect of the process. It's very easy for us to take a great big chunk of text and then say, right, okay, we're going to do all of these things. No, keep it very, very simple. Remember, targeted intervention is the thing that works. So the difficulties that we might be looking at are, it could be getting the main idea, finding the detail, predicting the outcomes, understanding inference. Do we know the difference between fact and opinion? Are we able to use contextual clues? I'm a big fan of the Prime-Ed materials because they take these different skills at different age reading abilities, or different reading abilities, not age, different reading abilities, and then they work on them one at a time. And I like the way they start off with, right, we're going to do it together. We're going to model how you do this. And then we got another version, which is the scaffolded version. And then there's, okay, right, now do it on your own. And then you can review it. And they're a great tool for being able to use your teaching as teaching time, and then give the child something to do on their own independently to consolidate what it is that you've covered in your letters. But it's all working just towards one thing, and that could be just finding the detail. But something like finding the detail, we can do that just using a section of text from a book. We can use a section of text from a magazine. Don't forget that most magazines that we find on the rack have got a reading age of about 12. So they're not difficult to read. And if the child is interested in something, go with that interest. If it's ponies or football or railways, whatever it might be, follow their interest, because reading we want them to read because we need them to read to be able to get through our education system and to enhance their knowledge, but actually they want to read for meaning. So what is meaningful for them? Think back to where we started at the beginning. We need to read for a reason. And if it's a case of finding what the child is interested in and then looking at where is this process breaking down, so how can you use their interest in order to support the skills that you're trying to help them build. This is a screenshot of a book called Reasoning and Reading, which is an American resource, which in some places is very, very American. However, here we've got just a couple of examples of finding the main idea. So Aunt Martha was having trouble keeping her dog Foxy from chasing cars. She tried training him to stay off the road. Then she tried keeping him in the house. Foxy was a German Shepherd. The neighbours were afraid they would hit the dog one day. Foxy was 2 years old. Finally, Aunt Martha built a large dog pen so Foxy could be outdoors without being a problem to anyone. So what's our topic sentence? Aunt Martha was having trouble keeping her dog Foxy from chasing cars. Okay, there's our topic sentence. Have we got sentences within that paragraph that are not necessary, that are information that don't necessarily need to be in that paragraph? Do we need to know that Fox is a German Shepherd? Do we need to know that Fox is 2 years old? And then we've got Noah Webster, very talented person. He wrote a dictionary at a time when there weren't many dictionaries. Some people don't like to look up words in dictionaries. He was also a good lawyer and teacher. He was not a politician, but he supported the leaders of our new nation, including George Washington, as he lectured around the country. Even paperback dictionaries today have about 50,000 words in them. That's a really good paragraph to unpick with a child as to, well, what's the paragraph trying to say? What do we want in that paragraph? What could we put in a different paragraph? How can we split it out? Because don't forget the paragraph, everything in the paragraph should be relating to one thing. These detective exercises. And then we've got close exercises, which I've referred to several times already this morning, which I love because we can do it on so many different levels. We can do it to understand the different types of words, whether they're nouns, verbs, pronouns, adverbs, adjectives. So often children don't really understand the meanings of these words and how they need to use them. They need multiple adjectives, things like that. Creative as you like. There is software you can use, or you can just do it with a Word document. And then we can scaffold it because we can give them a word bank, or we can actually just leave it to their imagination. We can take complex texts that we've read for comprehension. So there are quite a few resources that will do this. They'll take a piece of comprehension and they'll also provide it as a close exercise. Because with a close exercise, if you've got the reading comprehension and then you've got a close exercise, if you haven't really understood when you read it the first time, you won't be able to do the close exercise of the same text. So really, really useful thing to do. So what are we doing? Well, we're putting together a jigsaw, aren't we? We're looking at what skills are involved in reading and where is the process of reading comprehension breaking down. What do we need to do to be able to intervene? Don't forget, working memory is incredibly important. Our mental post-it note can shrink. And it can shrink for all sorts of reasons. It can shrink because we're having difficulty paying attention. We're distracted. Now, we could be distracted for all sorts of reasons. There could be background noise. We could be hungry. We could have an attentional control difficulty. The child next to us could be annoying us. It could be that actually the chair we're sitting on is really uncomfortable. Or it could be that I'm being asked to sit next to an open window and the sun's beating on my back and I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Or that the clothes I'm wearing are itchy. There's so many different reasons why somebody could be struggling with attention. And we need to notice that, because if we can't pay attention, then that is stopping us from keeping our working memory active and its maximum potential, and also our ability to pay attention to what it is we're doing. And then we've got anxiety. We talked about anxiety an awful lot this week, and it's so important because when we're anxious, we don't process in the same way as we do when we're not anxious. So this is why it's so important to work in this zone of proximal development, to scaffold, to start with where is the child with their learning? What is it they're comfortable with? What is it they can do? And then just going that little bit step further from it and building and building and building and building, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build skills, but we're trying to build confidence. And if we can build the skills and build the confidence, then we end up with good readers and good comprehenders, because if we're not good comprehenders, reading is a chore. Reading is not something that we enjoy doing or we're going to choose to do. And it's going to be a struggle as we move forward in life. So, thrown quite a lot of information at you. Are there any questions? I haven't seen what's going on in the chat, so I have no idea.
Thank you very much, Kate. Yeah, there was a lot of discussions in the chat. I don't think so much questions, but yeah, people kind of following along the session and enjoying it from the looks of it. Thank you very much. I find it really interesting to learn about kind of the principles behind things. It's really interesting to see how kind of like almost the mechanics of learning. The students that I see are teenagers, so we're not going to be doing things like that, but I do notice like comprehension difficulties. Like if a student has dyslexia, then the words that they come across in science can be very confusing because a lot of them have the same word stems and there may only be a few letters difference between them. Do you have any suggestions for how we can help students like that?
For the actual reading of them, so something like precision monitoring, which is as old as my granny, but it's actually very effective, can be really useful. So precision monitoring, what you do is you take 5 words and then you can put them into a grid of 40 words, so 40 spaces, so they're all jumbled up, and then they have to read them, and it's how fast can they read them accurately. Yeah. So that's about getting that automatic reading going on. Yeah. And you can do that. You'd start off with those words on cards, maybe, so they're reading them. So and it's about reading them and then linking the meaning. Yeah. So there again, it's about having, cards with the meanings upside down on the table, turn over the card, turn over the meaning. Are they matching? No, it's just Kim's game. Yeah. And then if you can do anything visual to be able to make the difference or give them a visual clue difference between those 2 words. Yeah. You can scaffold it. You can have the 2 that match with similar colours, but the danger is the children will go from, oh, well, the 2 red ones, that's not the meaning. They're not linking the word and the meaning. Yeah. But pre-teaching is huge as well. I cannot stress that enough, especially for the dyslexic children. So if you can get from school what they're going to be teaching them next term in science, for example, and then get those keywords embedded before they go into class. Because that means that when they're in the class and the teacher uses that word, maybe with a sort of quick reference to what it means, they already know what that word means. They're secure in that. So that's not going to, teachers just said a word I don't understand. What's going to happen? Anxiety. Yeah. Mental capacity shrinks. Yeah. Yeah. So we need, those are the things that we need to do. We need to give them these tools. So yeah, pre-teach vocabulary.
I remember that myself. If something happens in the lesson that triggers that anxiety, then you just don't take in any of the next 10 minutes of the lesson. That's it, gone.
No, and it's often that child who's got, as soon as they put their hands up, they turn their ears off.
Yeah. I really like that because it's difficult sometimes to see where they're getting stuck, because I have a tendency to assume that the reading part is fine for teenage students, which isn't necessarily. So I don't necessarily know if it's that they can read the words well enough, or if they've misunderstood the meaning, or if they just haven't been listening to me today, so they missed when I gave them that word. So it's helpful to have different approaches and see like which one makes it stick for that child.
We talk to them about, kids are really fascinated about how their brain works and go, okay, well, let's analyze. These are the skills that you're using. So when that happens, well, where did it break down? Something's gone wrong here. What's happened? Ask them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's very linked, because if I'm teaching A-level biology and the brain and memory, then we're like, right, well, let's link this to what you're actually learning about your brain and put it into practice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you, Sarah.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, Kate. So when I was NQT mentor no, when I was an NQT, my mentor introduced me to Mantle of the Expert. I don't know if you come across that.
No, I haven't.
Ancient, but it's the principle of making the child an expert before you start teaching them about the subject. And so, for example, you know, we're going to make we're going to learn about or we're going to this is something I did with my year 5 class before I left. We're going to learn all about the Anglo-Saxons. So before we even did any writing, we'd had Anglo-Saxon food that we'd made. We'd made hats that didn't have horns on them. We'd looked at maps and explored the kinds of places and the coastline on Google Maps, and decided the kind of place that might be a good landing place, you know, all these kinds of things. And then we wrote about it. And it's about the principle of, it's almost like you can't, at the beginning of your slides, I was thinking about it, you can't write if you can't read, and you can't read if you can't speak. And that's what it boils down to, isn't it? So it's teaching those, like you said, teaching the pre-teaching, teaching those, these are the words that are going to be tricky in this text. Let's go through these, let's explore which ones do you understand, which ones have you not come across.
And what you just described is the visualization process. So in doing what you did with those year 5s is you created this visual imagery of Anglo-Saxons. So they became real. So they had, so when you were teaching it, they had something to hang it on. They had those mental hooks. And those were mental hooks that were meaningful to them. Yeah. They understand about hats, they understand about food, they understand about basic geography, of where the coastline is, things like that. So what you were doing in a very clever way is you were giving them that context for them to be able to link that to, which is why the context of what we're reading about is really, really important. You know, if a child has never come across, you might have an 11+ text that is it's a newspaper article or a magazine article, and it could be a travel reporter or something like that. If they've got no idea, you know, if travel to them is going to Weymouth, then there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's somebody who's exploring the jungle in the Amazon, kind of outside their knowledge base, isn't it?
They can't. Yeah, you're right. They can't visualize it.
No,
I have got.
you know, if they've never read any travel writing, they've got no idea that people do this.
Yeah. So
why would I be reading this?
Yeah, I did write in the chat. I have got an 11+ girl, and we were doing measurements. I teach mainly maths, to be honest now, but we were looking at measurements, and we were looking at imperial and standard measure. And we came across pints, and she was like, "What's a pint?" And I said, "Well, it's the things, you know, you see these big glasses of beer. Never seen one. Never ever seen one. She's Muslim. Why would she have seen a pint of beer?" She finally said to me, "Is that what Homer drinks?"
Okay.
So she got it. She got the connection. But of course, you know, something that's so natural and innate to all of us is just not in her life. It's not in her sphere. So yeah, it's unusual, isn't it, that actually it's not just children who have these, you know, difficulties, who've got the ability to misunderstand something or not comprehend something the way that we think.
Yeah, exactly. That, you know, that classic thing of monarch, you know.
Yes.
What do you mean you don't know what a monarch is? You know, I mean, their history teacher was amazed that they didn't understand what the word monarch was. But, you know, so we often make these assumptions. Very easy for us to make these assumptions. It's very, and what's important is actually in the safe space of tutoring, that fantastic safe space to empower the child to go, I don't know what that word means.
Yeah.
That's okay. This is how we learn. We learn by asking questions, by being brave enough to say, I don't know what that means. We don't have to wait for somebody to say, what does that word mean? I don't know. Yeah. And that's really, really important. really important.
Yeah. Georgina, I think what you were saying as well is that when you're reading sort of those higher level texts, science kind of texts, you're breaking them all down. And actually you touched on it, Kate, as well. You were talking about, you know, what's the structure of the text. And again, with this, the same girl, we're starting to write an argument. She looked at it and she said, oh, this is persuasive writing. So we looked at what a good one looks like. So this is persuasive. I said, oh, what makes you think it's persuasive? She said, oh, it's, you know, it starts off saying school holidays should be shorter. And she could not get over the fact that it was a persuasive piece of writing. So we broke it down and we looked, well, what's this? If we gave this paragraph a job title, what would it be? We said, well, this is the introduction. Second paragraph, this is facts. Third paragraph, that's his opinion. Fourth paragraph was referring back to the reader, what do you think? She went, I don't know why that one's there. I said, okay, so would it be the same in a persuasive text? No, in my persuasive text, I was trying to get Surrey Council to keep urban foxes. So, okay, so, you know, what's the difference? And finally, we got to, it's not fact and opinion. They are two different sides of an argument. But she could not see that at the start. And it's very similar in scientific texts, isn't it? That you think they can read it all fluently, but have they actually understood the purpose of the text?
I love that. Yeah. I have too much of a STEM brain, I think, of things as all being facts. Analysing text like that is really interesting. Yeah.
Did you see Andrea's post on LinkedIn last night? I think she posted it yesterday. 53% of teenagers cannot distinguish between fact and opinion.
That's very scary.
Isn't it?
She linked it to the news as well. I think Andrea's article or a post was talking about it in terms of the context of news.
Yes, yeah.
And things. Yeah. They couldn't work out the context of the question or the article, who was writing it, how that would taint their views. Not taint, that's the wrong word, but change the position they came from, and even just the facts being true versus opinion being.
Yeah.
It's a scary thought, isn't it?
And it's a skill that's missing, not just from it's a skill that's missing from secondary English as well.
Yeah. Yes. And you know, there's the you know, using graphic organisers for that sort of exercise is really important, because it's helping separate it. And it's this whole thing about downloading it. Yeah. So don't try and do it all here. Download it, sort it out. Yes. I love my different coloured post-it notes. I'm sorry.
I
can sort things. I can sort things out. I can move them around. I can think like that. Yeah, it's just so important. Or highlighters or different coloured crayons or whatever it is, and then changing your mind. And that's why I like the electronic mind maps, because I can change my mind and go, no, well, I don't think that is that. I think it belongs over there, and that's really useful. So it's about what works for the child. And, you know, as Melanie said in the chat, you know, it's about going, where are you now? Where are you now? It doesn't matter where you are now. It's not a judgment. It's just an information. Yeah. And let's take where you are now. What gaps have you got? What strengths have you got? Yeah. And can we build on it? Going back to Monday, you know, we often, so while we've got a child who's got dyslexia, we've got a diagnosis of dyslexia, we know they've got a weakness in visual processing, typically a weakness in working memory, a difficulty in phonetic decoding, and these are the things that are getting in the way of reading process and reading comprehension. But actually, many of these children have got fantastic fluid reasoning skills. So if we can break that text down, they're the kids who can make all of those links. You know, there is a reason why GCHQ employs so many dyslexics.
They don't take the straight path, do they? They're kind of like looking around exploring rather than going, I'm at A, I need to get to B, let's do a straight line.
So you know, if you've got a child who is creative, who's really good at making these different links, be explicit about that, help them understand their strengths so that they can actively use those strengths, yeah, to be able to support the things they find difficult.
I love it. I'm just going to put your link in the chat there, Kate, because I feel like we could have many more of these conversations, and I think we will have to. Clearly everyone is really enjoying this chat, so we're gonna have to find a way to include more of them in future festivals and events.
Well,
Does anybody have?
I hope it's been useful.
Oh yeah,
Very, yeah, very,
really great.
yeah. Like I say, I don't often think about these things. I tend to make assumptions because I'm working with older students, and they're not the correct assumptions to make. So it's really helpful to me to think about things a bit differently. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to share?
I do. I work with children that are young, very young. I'm an early years specialist, but I also work with like year ones, year twos. And it was really good to kind of refresh my mind because they're not there yet. So to know what I need to look, and obviously there may be some gaps, little people's gaps. So it was really, really good because yeah, if you know, just to start thinking about what we need now so we can prepare for what they need then. So that was really good. Thank you.
Good.
And I can put my parent hat on at this point because I've got a year 2 and a pain in the butt. She's going to be reception in September. I had to work that out then, how old she was. And they are actually already including things like, they call it VIPERS, so vocabulary, inference, prediction. Explanation, recall, and I can't remember what the S is. Summarizing, there we go. And all of those I heard. There we go. I can't recall it, obviously. But she can. But in some of the books, they've got the vocab at the front, or they'll have some questions at the end. Who did this? Or did they choose this, that, or that? And I mean, it's year 2, it's fairly basic. Though actually Lily's doing a really good job of reading, so she's into the famous 5 level. But even then, start to bring some of those things in now at year 1 and year 2, so that they're already part of her language, her conversation about reading when in school and with us as parents. We can be underpinning that already. So I mean, she doesn't have any reading difficulties or anything like that at the moment, but just having those skills under there means that it'll be easier as she goes up when she needs to be able to do things. They are
so important, Helen. They are just so important. I did a whole series of posts, I think, on Instagram, which are all, I need to rework them because when I looked at them, I went, when Samantha looked at them, she said, yeah, they're a little bit blunt because they've just got titles like AF1, AF2, which is the assessment focus, but actually all the information in them is how you can support your child and what questions you can ask your child and what models you can give to your child as you are reading a story with them. So there's 7 different, or there were, I think they went out in 2015, but there's 7 different assessment focuses for reading. And as a sort of teacher working within a classroom, I had 7 different pots, nice little rainbow colours with sticks in, with the questions, with these different questions. So I've taken those and put them into posts. They are just so incredibly important because Kate was mentioning as well about getting to that fluency. And then you ask them a question and they've got absolutely no idea, but they've read it so expressively that you're like, oh yeah, they know what that means. No, they haven't got a clue. They absolutely haven't got a clue.
Yeah, I like the fact that they obviously, because it's little kids, they call it vipers, and then there's snakes all over the place. Assuming you don't have a snake phobia going on in the classroom. But yeah, it's easy. And can I talk today? No. They don't pick out one of those every time. But I did the other day. We were reading a book to the 4-year-old. The 7-year-old was doing the reading, and I just paused at the point. I think the china cup had broken in the suitcase, and they tried to open this suitcase by force. I said, what do you think they're going to do? And just held it before I turned the page. And obviously, this is 4-year-old books. They mended the cup or something like that. But it was just getting them to think, what do you think is going to happen next? That inference of, it's a children's book, the prediction of, okay, they're trying to be friendly, they're trying to look out, what's going to, yeah. I mean, it's you can even just do it one question when you're reading or something with.
And Melanie, your question in the chat about, or your message in the chat about the adults that you're teaching who's struggling with command verbs. One thing you could do is have a very short piece of text and then use those command verbs just relating to that very short piece of text, so that you're limiting the amount of text that they're relating to. Yeah,
that would be excellent. That's a really good idea. Thank you. Yeah, because a lot of the children, well, I'm teaching childcare, and a lot of my learners are all different age groups, but there's some gaps, and then obviously, and there's gaps, and then it will cause anxiety. So it's level 3, so obviously they should know. And so yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
it's okay. Or just say to them, well, I think you're struggling to understand the difference between explain and describe, so can we have a session to look at that?
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay,
Wonderful.
well, thank you
very
for your
much.
time today.
Thank you, Kate.
Lovely to see you. Enjoy the rest of the festival.